My name is David Sanchez. I'm the political director for DACA, which is the Democratic Attorney General Association. We have our amazing attorney generals on our panel here: AG Stein from North Carolina, AG Ellison from Minnesota, AG Healy from Massachusetts, and AG Nessel from Michigan. For us, this is a really important time because we have 25 attorney generals that are part of our Democratic attorneys general, and then we also have 30 races up that are up in 2022, and because of that, there's a lot of issues on the line, and so I just wanted to make sure everyone had a little bit of background on what we're doing today and how we're able to frame some of this conversation. So we're going to be talking to our attorney generals and what makes them the people's lawyers. The world witnessed how crucial the work of AG's offices was during the prosecution of former police officer Derek Chauvin. AG Ellison, could you please describe the efforts and accountability for the family of George Floyd and the community seeking justice after the tragic murder last year, and what specific broader lessons carrying out a successful prosecution?
Well, everybody wants to see both the investigation and the prosecution be objective and independent. And people do have a sense that maybe that's not always the case. So when my office was brought in, it was brought in because people wanted to know, no matter what the charges are they based on the law and the facts as opposed to some prior relationship or political loyalty issue. And so, we stepped in to help. In Minnesota, the governor has to either appoint us or the county has to ask us to come in. Both occurred in the Floyd case. We don't have original jurisdiction, but not all offices are the same. Some may. But we stepped in and we, tried to do our duty. And, since then, a lot of the counties have called us when they have police accountability, when they have officer-involved deaths, and we've declined some after receiving them and reviewing the cases. We have declined to charge some officers because we thought that the facts and the law weren't there, but we have charged others as well. In fact, in the middle of the Floyd case, there was a tragic situation where a 20-year-old kid was shot and killed when the officer confused the taser and the gun. And so that case is going to trial on November 30th. We're working hard on that. But I think that all of us play one role or another, whether it's convening conversations, which we can do, or play that role of prosecutors of last resort, or are just a voice for fairness and justice. We all, I think, have that role to play, and all of it, one time or another, have been considered in the course of a tragic situation where an officer used deadly force on police. And I know that I'll let my colleagues speak for themselves, but they know that we've been on the phone together, and it's been productive and helpful. And I do think that one of the tragedies of Congress not passing, let me just say, the Senate Republicans not passing the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, is that it would have given both state and federal pattern and practice authority, which would have given us legal authority to help try to reform some police departments that have chronic problems. And so, but we worked on it. Many of us spoke up on it, and we will continue to be a force for safety and human rights together, because we can have both.
Great. I want to go next to AG Nessel. You've been a national leader on addressing the school-to-prison pipeline, including a coalition of AGs in a letter to the U.S. Department of Education and Justice on the disparities of disciplinary actions. Can you tell us a little bit about your work on the issue and why it's important to you?
Yeah, somebody was bound to not unmute, and it had to be me, of course. So, this has been such an exciting area for us to be working in right now. So before I was Attorney General, I was prosecutor in Michigan's most populous county that was responsible for about half of all the criminal cases that come out of the state of Michigan, Wayne County. So I had really gotten used to seeing firsthand the results of school discipline policies that disproportionately punish people of color and LGBTQ students, and really didn't empower the student to make better choices, but instead really taught them from an early age that the system was stacked against them. And so, as you mentioned, I led a national push to have the Department of Education basically reverse the incredibly harmful policies of the Trump administration that put in place on school discipline, but also to go a step further by recognizing the disparities in school discipline, not only because they cut along racial lines, but also, as I indicated, based on their gender, sexual orientation, and gender identity. So the Biden administration was incredibly responsive to our letter, and I'm very excited to say that we are meeting with federal officials from the Department of Education and the Department of Justice next week to share our thoughts on what a new policy would look like, and to share the success stories we've seen of restorative practices in Michigan, so that kids end up, finishing their education, moving forward on their educational opportunities instead of ending up in the criminal justice system. And so I've seen firsthand, I've been touring the state, and I've been seeing these restorative practices and work. And I just visited an elementary school actually in Lincoln Park, which is just outside of Detroit, where they have a restorative practices program in place for years that they call Resilient Schools. And it's a trauma-informed approach to resolving conflicts and to support student recovery in the wake of a lot of adversity, especially in the wake of COVID. So we're so confident that these practices work in Michigan that we've made it a law that schools have to consider restorative practices when they're disciplining a student, and then they must only use suspension expulsion as a last resort. And so with all of Michigan's kids now returning to in-person learning, I'm sending a letter to all school administrators in the state, reminding them of their obligations to consider restorative practices and offering to partner with them to make their programs a success. And this is just another example, I think, of the profound impact you can have when you have local, state, and federal officials that are all working collaboratively on a common sense goal, and that we finally have a chance to do that again, working with the Biden White House. And I'm feeling very, very confident we're going to make some progress in the near future, and I'm very excited about it. It is going to impact the lives of school kids, not just all over the state of Michigan, but I think all over the United States.
AG Healy, could you tell us a little bit about having served under 3 administrations and how you were able to work with those administrations and how important that was?
Yeah, look, I served under the Obama administration, and we actually did a lot of work together. Our offices and the Obama administration, we did have some battles. I was lead counsel as civil rights chief on our successful challenge to DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act. We had to actually sue the Obama administration. Fortunately, they changed positions during the course of the litigation, but that's normal. Years before that, Massachusetts sued George Bush's EPA to get them to regulate greenhouse gases. That was a case we won in the Supreme Court. So that sort of thing is normal. Sometimes we're working with administration, sometimes we come into crosshairs. I will tell you, I am so grateful to wake up each morning with the Biden-Harris administration in place. We're going to keep pushing them on initiatives. We're going to keep looking for opportunities to partner with them on addressing climate change, improving access to healthcare, dealing with the fundamental economic insecurity that some are facing, standing up for reproductive rights like we did the other day. Many of our states joined in support of the U.S. Department of Justice's suit to successfully hold that terrible ban from going forward in Texas. So we're going to find ways to continue to work together. One of the things that has been so destructive that I don't think we've ever seen before in another White House is what Trump administration did with its lack of respect for the Constitution, for the rule of law, for institutional norms. It is so refreshing to have an administration that actually believes in those things, believes in science, believes in data. But the consequences of those Trump years are significant, and we live with that every day, and we've just got to continue to find ways as Democratic AGs to partner both with federal partners and with local partners to really push back and try to make things right again, going in a direction of equality and justice and fairness and opportunity for all Americans.
Thank you, AG Healy. So what I'll do now is I'll finish up our conversation on criminal justice, but I want to talk to AG Stein. In North Carolina, you were tapped by Governor Cooper to co-lead the task force on racial equity and criminal justice, which led to dozens of recommendations in the state's criminal justice system. Could you talk about the process that led to those recommendations, and as a role, as your AG, how you can help implement those recommendations?
I'm happy to, David. And I do want to say just a word of appreciation as an American for what Keith did in Minnesota. He did what we want all prosecutors to do, which is to do an independent assessment of the evidence and then decide if charges are appropriate, and if so, what charges, and then prosecute the case. And Keith, as we would all expect, did each of those decisions above reproach, completely professionally, and secured an appropriate conviction. And so, Keith, thank you.
Thank you.
The murder of George Floyd shook this entire nation, and it obviously Mr. Floyd was not the only man who has died unjustly at the hand of the state. And what happened, though, is it was really a spark for this entire nation to really reckon with our history with race. And obviously, being from North Carolina, we have a long and problematic, sordid history of race issues. And what the governor asked me, and I was honored to co-chair along with Justice Anita Earls of our North Carolina Supreme Court, a task force for racial equity and criminal justice. And it was a broad-based task force. We had justice-involved individuals, public defenders, criminal justice reform advocates, community leaders, mayors, policymakers, and we had sheriffs and chiefs of police and line officers, prosecutors. We had the full array of perspectives represented on our task force, and we met untold number of hours from July through December, basically weekly, and we came up with a report that I'm very proud of, 125 recommendations. But the governor was very clear, this was not about a report that you stick up on a bookshelf. It was always about identifying recommendations and then implementing them. And that's what we've been doing this year. We just had a bill signing at the governor's mansion about 2 or 3 weeks ago of a comprehensive criminal justice reform piece of legislation that impacts the way officers are recruited, impacts how they are trained, and has a variety of new accountability measures to make sure that when they don't do things the right way, they either get corrected, or if they're not appropriate to be in that line of work, they find some other job. And we feel very positive about what we are getting done here. Our view is very holistic. It's not just about that moment where the law enforcement officer interacts with the citizen, like what we saw with Mr. Floyd. Rather, it is the criminal justice system from start to finish. And we've identified all the different ways where there are disparities of treatment between Black people and white people, and we've identified solutions to address those disparities. And we got a lot of work to do. I feel very positive about what we've accomplished, but we recognize we have so much further to go.
Thank you so much, AG Stein, for that. And all of our AGs that are working so hard on criminal justice. We're going to pivot a little bit to something that's near and dear to me, student loans. AG Healy, since President Biden's inauguration, one of the issues that's kind of gained prominence, especially during the pandemic, is student loan debt relief. And many leaders and organizations called on President Biden to forgive $50,000 of federal student loan debt to borrowers. And just wanted to see AG Healy, as a leader of a coalition of 17 attorney generals that co-wrote a letter to Congress in support of a resolution to urging the president to take executive action. Just want to know why it was important for you to take that on, and how is it using the state's AG significant platform that you have, issue important on the key issues like student loan forgiveness.
Yeah, thanks, David. I mean, we do this because this is the work that we do every day as AGs. We're out there protecting our residents, protecting consumers, and protecting student borrowers. I mean, we've sued predatory for-profit schools. We've sued loan servicers. Every day, we're trying to assist students with their loan repayment plans. In fact, years ago, I created a student loan assistance unit in my office because we were getting so many calls from students who were behind in their loans, facing default, and needed help. So, this is something that is real to all of us. And it's real because it's so huge. I mean, student loan debt is over $1.7 trillion and growing. It is literally keeping people from getting married, starting families, buying homes, buying cars, starting businesses. It's a huge drag on our economy. And of course, it's had a disproportionate impact on borrowers of color. So the bottom line is that this work, including debt cancellation, debt relief, is absolutely essential to aid struggling borrowers, to boost our economy, and importantly, to help close this racial gap. And that's why I join with my colleagues in the advocacy around executive action. We're certainly going to keep fighting in court. I think we sued Betsy DeVos, I don't know how many times, so glad she is gone. Great to have an administration that understands the importance of education and public education and recognizes that we need to find a way to create relief from borrowers, because it's not only impacting them and their families, it actually is slowing down our economy as well. And that's how we come to this, I think, as lawyers and those who are looking out for the best interests of residents in our state. And David, you're young. You mentioned this is an issue facing you. The fastest rate of growth of student debt right now, holders, are people in their 60s, if you can believe it. And so, this messes with retirement and a whole bunch of things. And that's why we're going to keep pushing the administration and Congress on this.
Thank you so much, AG Healy. Next up, we'll talk about voting rights. AG Nessel, I know this is a really important thing for you as well, so we'll start with you. The 2020 election, was the election of the big lie. We saw Republicans, including Republican AGs, perpetrating false narratives that the election was stolen. 18 Republican attorney generals, led by Ken Paxton, filed a lawsuit against battleground states to overthrow the election results. AG Nessel, as one of the AGs in one of those key states, why is it important to have Democratic AGs serving in battleground states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin? And why do we need Democratic AGs in battleground states like Arizona, Florida, and Georgia?
Well, let's not mince words here about this issue. Without Democratic AGs in the swing states, we no longer have a democracy in the United States of America. That's the long and short of it. Obviously, we had these massive efforts to overturn the election results. I don't even like calling it overturn the election. Let's just call it an attempted coup. That's what it was. It was an attempted coup by the then President of the United States, Donald Trump. But for the fact that we had attorneys general that stood strong in states like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan and Nevada, we simply would not have had an outcome where the actual person who won those states got the electoral votes for those states. So in my case, Joe Biden won the state of Michigan by 154,000 votes. That's not even close. But effort after effort was made to overturn the election in my state. But for somebody holding strong and defending the state against lawsuit after lawsuit, we never would have had those 16 electoral votes go to Joe Biden, who of course overwhelmingly won the election in this state. And whether it was joining in with my Democratic colleagues in the case against the United States Postal Service to ensure that during the course of a global pandemic, that people had the ability to even vote by mail, which, by the way, in Michigan is a constitutional right. But as we know, the Postmaster General did everything in his power to make sure that those ballots would never be received in time to be able to be counted. Whether you had things like that before the election, whether you had things like the effort by the Texas AG, Ken Paxton, and 17 of his Republican colleagues trying to decertify the election in 4 states, 5.5 million voters in my state that would have been disenfranchised had that occurred, or whether you had the King case filed by the likes of Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood and others to try to decertify the election. which we were able to defeat, and in doing so, actually have those attorneys be sanctioned. And let me say proudly that on November 4th of this year, I personally will be arguing before the Texas Attorney Grievance Commission for the disbarment of Sidney Powell, so that people like her can never again step into a court of law and make those kinds of dangerous and reckless statements, unsupported completely, that completely undermine elections in our state and all around the country, and in doing so undermine our very democracy. So had we had the individual, I flipped a red state, a state that had been red for 16 years in the AG's office. Had I lost that, and had we had the person who ran against me in my place, the election in Michigan would have been decertified, and that person would have gone along with this lawsuit, would have stipulated, and the election would have been decertified in Michigan, and those 16 electoral votes would not have gone for Joe Biden. They would have gone for the person who lost the election, Donald Trump. That's how important these AG offices are in swing states around the country. If we don't win these elections in 2022 to maintain people like myself, like Josh Call, like Aaron Ford, if we don't potentially flip states like Arizona and Georgia, we simply won't have a democracy anymore for the 2024 election. If Trump runs again, he will become president again, whether he actually wins the election or not.
Great, thank you, AG Nessel. For AG Ellison, I just wanted to, a quick, jump in here. I know we've seen numerous bills in the state legislature from Texas to Georgia trying to restrict voting rights, like limiting absentee ballot and drop-off locations that are not allowing volunteers to give out water to people standing in long lines. What role does a state AG play in these anti-democratic laws?
Well, many. Let me emphasize the litigation role. During the campaign season, we had people announce that they were coming to Minnesota and were going to, quote unquote, guard polls with weapons, and were recruiting armed people to stand outside of polls with guns to claim that they're protecting people's right to vote. Obviously, that was intimidating and designed to discourage and suppress people from the vote. We sued them, took them to court on several occasions, and we will do so. And we want to make it very, very clear. You try to intimidate the vote, you will be in court. We will sue you without batting an eye. But we also have an important policy role to play. I think my colleagues have laid that out very clearly. And we are on the forefront of helping to build that policy. But back to litigation strategies, we all joined together to sue the United States Postal Service as some of their leaders were trying to slow down the mails in service of Donald Trump. So we have a critical role to play. And I think one of the things that I'd like to see happen more, David, is that citizens would work with us to make sure that we protect the vote and protect democracy. Let's not start talking when there's a crisis. Let's build a relationship now. Call your local AG and let them know that you see them as an ally in the fight for democracy. And let me just say right now, all of us have to be thinking about redistricting. And we had to think about the census. So now we're dealing with the redistricting side of it. Very, very important. That's going down right now, folks. And nearly every AG is going to be playing a role in making sure that you have fair maps coming up. And some folks don't want fair maps. They want biased maps in their favor for Republicans. We're fighting for fair maps. My office is fighting for fair maps. So that's something we can join together and work on together now.
Thank you so much. I'll go to the next question here, but before I do that, I just want to say, for anyone that's listening in, we want to definitely encourage you to drop in some of the questions. We may have some time at the end of the program to get to some of those. So just wanted to give one more pitch for that. So we'll talk about reproductive healthcare, and in Texas recently we saw SB 8, a 6-week abortion ban, take effect, and we've seen in other states like Georgia and South Carolina pass similar legislation in the past. In December, the Supreme Court will hear arguments regarding Mississippi's 15-week abortion ban. Even Mississippi Attorney General Lynn Finch asked the court to overturn Roe versus Wade. So with access to abortion under attack, what is the role of the state AG in protecting reproductive health care? And I'll start with AG Healy, since I know you mentioned.
Yeah, what happened in Texas is just so wrong. It is a blatantly unconstitutional law, and it is harming people every day. The stories are heartbreaking, and we talked to our Democratic colleagues in Colorado and Nevada and New Mexico, where women and patients in those states weren't actually and haven't been able to access appointments for abortion because, understandably, so many people have fled Texas to get those services, and it's heartbreaking to hear the stories of what is happening. Women who are driving 1,000 miles round trip in a day because they don't have childcare at home. They don't have time off from work. They may be trying to escape an abuser who assaulted them and got them pregnant in the first place. The number of, just think about the fact that victims of rape and sexual assault under this law are forced to carry their pregnancies to term. And this novel thing where basically we've made citizens bounty hunters, vigilantes who are out there with an ability to sue. So many of us reacted swiftly. We organized an amicus brief that was cited in the opinion the other day. We stand strong, this group of AGs who are on this call and other colleagues, in doing everything we can to defend a woman's access to the health care that she needs. And we're going to continue to be in the courts fighting the abortion ban in South Carolina, fighting the abortion ban in Mississippi, and fighting whatever else comes. Obviously, it's incredibly important that Congress passes the Women's Health Protection Act, repeals the Hyde Amendment, and also passes the Freedom to Vote Act. Because let's be clear about what happened. 80% of Americans support Roe, and yet because we have Republican-dominated state legislatures that got in there and then gerrymandered things to keep Black and brown people from voting, we end up with a very undemocratic situation where we have these abortion bans and other incredibly restrictive laws on the books. We also have, unfortunately, a stolen Supreme Court. And, that is also anti-democratic. So we've got to continue to fight as AGs in the courts, in the court of public opinion, and just, be clear that we are not going to accept what happened in Texas. We're looking to stop it, make things right, and make sure that this doesn't happen in other places. But abortion rights are voting rights, and this all ties together. And I'm so proud of my colleagues for all the work that they've done, particularly in the battleground states, particularly in voter suppression states, going to court and taking on, these forces, anti-democratic forces that are looking to suppress the vote and people's rights.
Thank you so much, AG Healy. AG Nessel, did you want to jump in a little bit here?
Yeah, I absolutely did. So besides all the great work that AG Healy just talked about in terms of the Democratic AGs coming together on this issue, and I think it should be noted that we have, I think, one of the only organizations of its kind nationally where, in order to get support from the Democratic Attorneys General Association, you must be a supporter of reproductive rights for women, or you cannot be part of our organization. And I think that we're the only Democratic organization of its kind that can make that claim. But let me talk about states like mine, states like Michigan, where having an abortion or providing an abortion is already a felony that's on the books. And it was enforced for years. It's a 1931 law. The only reason that it is unenforceable today is because of Roe v. Wade. And the second that Roe v. Wade falls, in the event that it falls this term, which we believe that it will, that it's likely to, it will automatically become the law again. It doesn't have to be passed by the legislature, and it doesn't have to be signed by the governor. It's automatically in effect. I have statewide jurisdiction criminally in the state of Michigan, but we also have 83 county prosecutors in this state. And it was my commitment to do this. First of all, we know that making abortion illegal doesn't stop abortions from happening. It just makes them incredibly unsafe. And what it means is we will go back to the days that we were in before 1973, where women routinely died each and every day from illegal abortions that were not safe and were not properly performed by medical staff. And as a result, what we're going to see in my state again is that women are going to be pushed back into back alleys if they think they're going to be prosecuted. And again, this is a 4-year felony. And it's not just the medical providers that were prosecuted. Oftentimes it was the women who were having these procedures, even though they are allegedly the victims of these crimes. What would occur is if they refused to testify, they would be locked up and held in contempt of court. And so it was my pledge that because I am committed to supporting and securing the health, welfare, and safety of women all across my state, that I would not be prosecuting these cases, and that I would be working in concert with the Democratic prosecuting attorneys to make sure that in those counties, women could have safe abortions where they would not have to worry about being criminally prosecuted, and their providers would not have to worry about being criminally prosecuted. So this is incredibly important in my state. It will save lives. And I will tell you right now, if any of the Republicans running against me win, they have committed to having special enforcement where they have whole divisions of the office that do nothing but go after women and their providers and prosecute them and incarcerate them and imprison them. So there are very distinct differences between the Democrats who are attorneys general and the Republicans in this nation. And having a Republican take my place in Michigan in the event that Roe falls means one thing and one thing only, and that's that an unknown number of women will certainly die in my state because of abortion procedures that are not performed safely.
Thank you, AG Nessel. That was amazing. Thank you. We'll go ahead and go to or continue with some healthcare question here. AG Stein, this year, Democratic AGs saw success at the U.S. Supreme Court when the court upheld the Affordable Care Act, protecting access for healthcare for millions of Americans. Could you talk a little bit about ways in which your office is working to protect, constituents' healthcare, and what's on the horizon in the fight for affordable access to healthcare?
Happy to, David. And I just want to underscore the significance of what you just said. But for my fellow AGs and I and all the AGs on the Democratic side that intervened in Texas's lawsuit to strike down the Affordable Care Act, but for us, the Affordable Care Act would not be the law of the land any longer because the defendant was the federal government, the Trump administration. Well, the Trump administration went from our side of the courtroom to the plaintiff's side of the courtroom, arguing that federal law should be struck down. We refused and we appealed the Fifth Circuit decision to the U.S. Supreme Court. California, Javier Becerra, the new HHS secretary, our former colleague, was the lead of our coalition, and we won. And the impact, the positive impact on people across this country cannot be overstated. In my state alone, we had more than 4 million people with pre-existing conditions. We had nearly 2 million seniors whose prescription drugs were about $1,000 less expensive because of the Affordable Care Act. We had some 600,000 people who got their insurance through the exchange that otherwise they wouldn't have been able to get insurance. And another 500,000 had subsidized through private insurance, subsidies through private insurance that allowed them to purchase insurance. About 70,000 young people under the age of 26. So these are just hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people getting access to healthcare, millions of Americans not being denied, North Carolinians not being denied healthcare because of pre-existing conditions. So a tremendously important and deeply satisfying win on our part. In North Carolina, we are one of the dozen states that have not expanded Medicaid. So at every opportunity, at every speech I give, I underscore that the single most important thing the state legislature could do to help people in our state is to say yes to the federal government's offer to expand Medicaid here in North Carolina. But in order to really effectively ensure that people can get access to affordable health care, we have to contain healthcare costs. And so I'm using my authority as Attorney General to try to achieve just that. So for instance, I'm part of a coalition of AGs suing the generic pharmaceutical companies for price fixing and raising the cost of our prescription drugs. And I'm scrutinizing healthcare mergers in our state to make sure that those don't drive up costs. And I'm pushing the federal regulation on pricing transparency so that people know what it actually costs them to get a procedure at one hospital as opposed to another hospital, because with that information, it will have that competition. It will have a positive effect in driving costs down.
Right. Thank you, AG Stein. AG Ellison, did you want to jump in and talk a little bit about this?
No, that was a spontaneous affirmation of what Josh was saying. You know, I kind of just couldn't help myself and said, "Way to go!" But here's what I will add. Everything Josh said is absolutely right, but I'll add this on. AGs can be a source of convening statewide dialogue on healthcare and thereby multi-state. We had a task force in Minnesota looking at lowering prescription drug prices. We got people from the community, patients, doctors, all kinds of folks to come up with how we push this down. And what we came up with is that really the healthcare industry has socialism for the well-to-do and rugged individualism for everybody else. Highly concentrated market, very opaque market, no pricing little pricing signaling, and things could be so much better. You know, Minnesota's a border state, just like Michigan and Massachusetts. We have people going up to Canada to get their insulin for 10% of what they pay for in Minnesota. It's wrong. AGs like us are fighting this. You can sue them, just like Josh talked about, which can also pull people together and help be that force that drives this change. So actually, I wasn't meaning to interrupt Josh, and I'm sorry I did. I just, I didn't have my mute on, so they heard me say, "Go, Josh."
You have carte blanche to interrupt me anytime.
All right, bro.
Fantastic. We're gonna switch and pivot a little bit, and let's talk about the 2021 elections and 2022 elections. Because there's never an off year for Attorney General's election. This year, AG Mark Herring is running for re-election with over 30 seats in play in 2022. AG Nessel, can you tell us a little bit? You've campaigned before. You were in a hard fought race. What's one thing you learned on the trail that was really important in AG races?
Well, I think it's important for people to know what we do. Honestly, I think that's the most important thing that we can do and that we can share with everyone from Netroots Nation is to tell people, to tell their friends and their family and people who are interested in being involved that we have to pay attention to these down ballot races that frankly, secretaries of state and attorneys general were just not at the forefront of people's minds for a very long time, but they have to be now. And for people who paid attention to the great work that we did during the course of the Trump administration, understanding that some of the very worst policies, of course, that were promoted by the Trump administration actually never went into effect because of our group of Democratic AGs working tirelessly against them. And people should know that of the lawsuits that we filed, 86% were successful. Imagine if we had not filed those cases, imagine if we had not won those cases, how much worse things would have been, as bad as they were during those 4 years. But in addition to that, as we've talked about, all of these different issues that are so pressing, I think there are still a lot of people out there that, they might know what their U.S. senator does. They might know what their governor does. Those are important positions, no doubt. But attorneys general at this time are equally as important, just as important as whoever you elect to be in the United States House of Representatives or the United States Senate or your governor's office. It's just as important that we have Democratic attorneys general. And in some cases, quite honestly, very honestly, more important at this point, at this juncture. So I would urge people, who are politically involved, and if you are watching this right now, it means that you are, to go out and to tell people how important these races are and to get involved in one of these races. And what I would urge you to do, if you live in a solidly blue state, please consider adopting a purple state like mine to make sure that, people like myself and other AGs that worked tirelessly to flip our states don't lose these states. And that in fact, moving forward, of those 30 AG races that are up next year, and of course, Mark Herring, we have to work tirelessly for him to be reelected this year to make sure that we keep as many AG offices blue as possible, and that we convert red states where they're doing some really awful things, to be quite honest with you, and convert them into blue states. These positions matter. Attorneys General in the United States of America, our state AGs matter.
Thank you, AG Nessel. Next, I'll ask our co-chair, our DACA co-chair, sorry, AG Maura Healy. People have heard, on this panel, all the great work that Democratic attorneys general are doing. The importance of this year and next year's elections. What is one way that people on this panel can do to get involved? I know AG Nessel just mentioned that, but what's another way that that people can get involved in this panel this year and next year to make sure that we can keep our Democratic AGs?
Yeah, I think to follow what General Nessel just said, we've got a lot of important races on. We got Mark Herring on this year in Virginia. We've got to get him reelected, and then we have a number of seats next year. And I want to be really clear: if you don't have Democratic attorneys general in these states and in these battleground states, that is a serious issue for democracy and ultimately what's going to happen here, because we were the ones who could go to court. We were the ones who could represent the state. We were the ones who successfully stopped Donald Trump from his just incredibly shameful acts time and time again that are now further perpetrated by his followers and his adherents who care nothing of the rule of law, nothing of the Constitution, nothing, frankly, of their American brothers and sisters, the way they've treated this whole thing. So I would just say, visit DACA's website. You can read about our races. You can read about our wonderful AGs. You can read about our wonderful candidates. We are looking to pick up seats in other states. We are looking to compete. We are in solidarity with other state constitutional officers. Dana mentioned secretaries of state. We've worked very closely with secretaries of state. Look, the action is right now in state governments. They're the ones that write the rules on districting. They're the ones who, as I say, we have state legislatures like Texas and 20 others right now contemplating to do what Texas has done, getting out there with anti-democratic, voter suppression, anti-abortion laws and policies as examples. So visit our website, support our candidates, and I would encourage a laser focus on who your officials are and officials are at the county level, running elections and the like, because we need an army, a strong army to combat what unfortunately seems to be the GOP playbook through this year and through the midterms.
Thank you, AG Healy. I do want to make the plug for the website. Once again, our website is www.dems.ag. You can learn about the races that are going on right now and how you're able to plug in and help us make sure that we keep our amazing AGs and also help elect new AGs as well. I know that we are running last minute here. Last couple of questions. I do want to just kind of end it on a fun and nice, good note here, because I know we only have a couple of minutes left, and just want to jump in and just let me know what song or podcast you're currently listening to kind of let everyone at Netroots know that we do a lot of serious work, but also some of the fun things that we get to talk about as well. We'll start with AG Stein. What's on your phone right now?
I am. This will shock my colleagues to hear, but I am not particularly hip, so I'm pretty old school. And what I do is listen to Talking Heads radio in the background during the 80s. Kind of alternative rock was my era.
Okay, all right. AG Ellison.
Podcast wise, I'm listening to Reveal with Al Ledson. Very good podcast. Always has something helpful and useful. He did a wonderful series on housing, and we actually went out and took some policy changes based on that. And then there's Counterspin, which is a group that kind of analyzes the news in this era of miscommunication and misinformation. I find it extremely helpful. And then I'm listening to El Hilo. I'm trying to get my Spanish on. So that's my way to improve my Spanish language listening, which is harder than speaking or reading. So there you go.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, AG Ellison. AG Healy, do you want to give us a little bit what's going on in your podcast or playlist right now?
Well, I happened to see Alanis Morissette live a few weeks ago, so I still have a lot of Alanis on. I have a lot of 90s music on.
Oh my God, so did I, Laura. So did I. It was amazing.
Yeah.
It was the best concert ever.
25 years, amazing. I also saw Chris Stapleton the other night, and that was an awesome show. Different genres, but whatever.
Fantastic. Great. And then I'll close us out here. AG Nessel, let us know what you have going on.
First of all, and let me direct this to AG Healy, who will appreciate this. I saw for the first time in 25 years Indigo Girls in Grand Rapids. And I know I didn't win Kent County last time, but if the support I got at the Indigo Girls concert in Grand Rapids is any indication, I think I may win Kent County this time around. I don't know if it's a sample of supporters of mine, but I was very popular at the Indigo Girls concert. But I will say this, and again, I don't get any money at all from NBC or Peacock. However, if you watch Girls 5 Eva on Peacock, they also have a soundtrack that goes with it, and it's a very female empowering for middle-aged ladies like myself. So and I would really recommend that you watch it and then you listen to the soundtrack. It's by Sarah Bareilles, who is amazing. And so some of you who are listening might be like a little bit younger and not get all the references, but it is an amazing show and amazing songs. But also, if you could see Alanis Morissette as she tours the country, 2 thumbs up. Highly recommended.
Fantastic. Well, I want to make sure. Oh, go ahead. AG Healy?
No, I was just going to say thanks for the tip, Dana. Dana is the coolest cat among us. So, yep, that's great. I'll tune in.
Fantastic. Well, I want to say thank you all AGs so much for this amazing panel. Thanks, everyone.